Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode today of the Institute of Virtual Lunch and Learn series. We're very excited today to have two women join us for Women's History Month who have fantastic perspectives on our emerging industry. Liz King Caruso with TechC Talk and Dana Pake with MCW Events. Ladies, welcome to the show. I can't wait to have our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Now, let's get a little bit of background on where you guys come from and what your perspective is on the industry. Dana, just by luck of the draw, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, so my origin story is really interesting because I started out in PR and worked on MSN 8, Better with the Butterflies, so really dating myself. But it was the first time I really was introduced to experiential marketing. From there, I worked at Tableau for 5 years, was the first event manager, first event hire, grew that conference from 1,200 to about 12,000, realized I wanted to work on different problems because I'm in this business because I see events as really a mechanism for helping people. And I'm super passionate about designing human connection. So I went on to a little company called Envision, which really was a platform or a operating system for building digital products. And there I learned that events is a lot like building a product. So how did I apply design thinking to producing events? And then in December of 2019, I went out on my own. Good timing, but it actually ended up being incredible timing. So I've been on an independent consultant, partnering a lot with MCW events, clients like Twitch, the Democratic National Committee, GitHub, Slack, to name a few, and a lot of emerging companies as well. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear your perspective on where we're heading and where we've been over the last year. Liz, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here as well.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I have been in the events industry for 12 plus years at this point. Started at Columbia University doing events for them and quickly decided I enjoyed that, but I wanted to learn more about the rest of the events world. So I created my Twitter account, Liz King Events, which started getting client inquiries. And for a few years, I started saying, oh, it's not a business. It's just a Twitter account. And I would just refer them to someone else until I decided, why am I doing that? Let's just start my own business. So I broke out. I did it for a few years on the side while still working at Columbia, broke out on my own in 2013 and have never looked back. So exciting. Really love to work with a wide range of clients, mostly thought leaders and people who have their own brands to help them use events to, broaden their audience or sell a product or whatever they are trying to achieve. Very strategic stuff because, I really believe that that's the power of events. And then in addition to that, ever since about 2010, we've been running TechC Talk, which is an educational platform for other event professionals to learn about technology. I'm just super geeky and I love to share that part of the industry and educate. It's a funny thing because everyone always asks me, why are you educating your competitors essentially? But I'm definitely one of those people who believes, the rising tide floats all boats. It is better for all of us to be more knowledgeable and feel more secure. So especially as 2020 has pushed so many people into this digital space, it's been a really exciting ride. Happy to be here with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we share the passion for educating everyone around us because we feel like so much has changed in the past year. So to that end, what has the past year looked like? I mean, Dana, you went out right before, I'm starting to chuckle, you went out right before this all kind of changed our world. So how did you pivot? How did you apply all those lessons from your prior experiences and start helping and sort of diving into all things virtual and hybrid? What's your experience been?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I was really lucky because Twitch was an account for in real life, but weeks after shutdown, so March 28th, I think we had 9 days to turn around StreamAid. And the privilege I had working on that was I immediately recognized only weeks after we were sheltering in place and all events were canceled that we have to take a broadcaster approach. And what does that mean? I also got exposed to the creators on Twitch who really understand how to engage their online audiences, not just through gaming, but in conversation. And, I asked a nephew of mine, like, I don't get Twitch, explain it to me. And why do you pay donations to these people? And, really it was because it was about the gathering and they feel seen, heard, and understood. And isn't that what we're all doing? so that really helped propel me have a strong point of view how to help clients move from IRL to a digital first experience. The other thing I will say too that really helped me in the last year still now is I really go into it with a beginner's mindset. What does that mean? I don't bring the biases of IRL in necessarily. I try to look at it with fresh perspective from different perspectives so that we're creating something entirely unique that was designed to be virtual or digital first.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that perspective, because I think that that's something that people have gotten caught up in is, do I recreate my in real life event or am I creating something new? So yeah, I want to hear more about that. But Liz, what's your last year been? I mean, how did you guys, I mean, you were in the tech space, so maybe you were working with some of these tools, but would love to hear what your journey's been.
Well, yeah, I think 2020 was crazy for everyone. Very similar to so many in the industry. We experienced a lot of the cancellations and rescheduling in March. But for me, it was kind of lucky because with Texie Talk, we've been doing virtual and hybrid for 10 plus years. And we have always believed that that's a really strong component to events. There have been many, many times that we've tried to sell it to clients and it's kind of just an afterthought. It's like, yeah, sure, if we have some budget left over, we'll live stream. But in terms of really doing a well-executed virtual or hybrid event, that's always been something we do on our own with Texie Talk to kind of play with the space because most of our clients weren't that interested. So 2020 was suddenly this time when everyone in the industry wanted to talk what I wanted to talk about. And that was really fun, obviously really challenging for the industry. And really it was nice to leverage that community that we've been building for 10 plus years and be able to share resources. I mean, in addition to like the events that we did, we had just a ton of roundtables and, event prof virtual happy hours and opportunities to learn from other people in the industry and to really start brainstorming. I've spent so much time in the last year thinking about what does this mean? Because even for those of us who have enjoyed doing digital for a really long time, this is a whole new ballgame because now everyone's behavior has changed, their expectations have changed, and the technology finally has the backing and the support to change rapidly as well. And so there's just, it's this, the creative part of me has really enjoyed the last year because there is so much potential. There's not just money flowing into this area, but there's interest. And I do think this is a lot more now than just a Band-Aid to get us through until we can get back to in person. So, it's kind of a crazy thing to say that it was an exciting part of the year because clearly there were a lot of other things. But, when you look at that macro perspective and what that has done to set us up for the future, the next 5 to 10 years, and really shaken up our industry in a lot of ways that I think had to happen. It's never comfortable. Change is never comfortable, but I think it has positioned us to be really much more strategic in the future and much more successful and provide a lot more value to our clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last year, you could have had one of two perspectives. You could have kind of been down on your luck, or you could have buckled down and figure out how to make the most of it. And I think as an industry, that's what we've had to do. We've had to figure out how, to your point, Dana, reinvent experiences. How do you not necessarily recreate what's been going on, but how do you do something different? Maybe it feels similar, but maybe it's not exactly the same. To your point, Liz, that it sets us up for the next 5 to 10 years. What kind of redefinition do you think we're looking at that comes out of this last year?
There are a lot of things. I think one thing that I think about a lot is this idea of community. We've been very separated from people. And I think that, a lot of people are talking about in-person events, virtual and hybrid, but I really think it's about more than that. It's about remembering that one of the best things that we do is bring people together. We bring communities. Like Dana said, we make people feel like they're a part of something. And the idea of like a year-round event used to be laughable. It's like nobody will care about your event as soon as it's over. But there's kind of this transition that we've seen away from traditional social media where your information is being sold and you are the product. And that has simultaneously been at the same time where we are separated from other human beings in person. And I think what we're seeing is a lot more interest in building community and being a part of communities that really matter and align with who you are, as compared to just anything that's available out there. We're seeing huge community building on platforms like Clubhouse. And a lot of our clients are moving towards year-round programming. It's not just about the 1 year, the once a year annual event. It's about how do we build this community year round. And even in the events industry, we're seeing tech companies doing that like crazy. Everyone wants their own community all of a sudden. So I think that's one thing. But there's a lot of implications of what's happened over the last year. That's one of the ones that I really think we're going to see this focus on bringing people together. I saw a tweet yesterday from someone who had said basically what they think we should do as soon as we can return to in-person events is just have one long day of eating and hanging out and just catching up on what has happened, because now there's plenty of content. We've seen more content in the last year than we probably want to see again. What we're missing are those human connections. And I think we as an industry do such a good job of making that happen. And I think that focus is going to mean a lot of things. It's going to mean changes to our monetization strategy and changes to our content delivery. And it's going to mean a lot of change. But I think that's a really important shift as compared to just pushing out tons of content and filling trade show floors.
Sure.
Preach, Liz, preach. Oh man, I wish I could high five you. I want to double click on some of that. Yes, on community. I also think what has transformed, and Liz, you've been a big part of this and such a gift to the events industry, but I really feel like before COVID, it was knives out, a lot of competition, holding information close to the chest, and I hate to use the cliche silver lining, but that's really what I've experienced this year is community within our own space that didn't exist before. And I hope that continues to be nurtured and grow. Along with community, I think what's going to transform, especially in the B2B space and SaaS companies, it's field marketing's time to shine, man. They're going to get a front row seat where they have not typically in the past, where corporate events was getting all those dollars. Because Liz, you're right. I think that it's been, it's a lot of where I see clients fall down is they try to solve for just this moment in time, and you've invested all of this time, money and energy, and maybe some blood, sweat, and tears. And then it's just done. So how do you go in it with the end in mind? Liz, you were articulating this too. What's your why? What's the currency of this event? And in addition to building community, where are you driving engagement past that event? And that's for field. And I think field's actually going to be our great experimenters as we try to go back into gathering in real life and hearing a lot of energy around this hub and spoke model. It's going to be field strategy, and like corporate events will always have this digital first programming tied to that. I think what's also exciting to see, and Liz, you were a trailblazer here, Tableau was too, is the advent of the event technology manager and hiring internally technical directors. They're going to have a really pivotal role in what that program design looks like and the success of it.
Absolutely.
How do you think that this last year, in light of Women's History Month, how does this idea that we're all working from home, that we're all remote, that there are these new tools for us to communicate and to get content out there, how does this impact and improve opportunities for women?
Liz, do you want to go take that one first? Or I have lots of thoughts.
Yeah, I can share just one thing, which is I don't know that it has. I think that we've seen in the workforce more women leaving the workforce than at any other time. We have a client who is specifically in the DEI space, and they're constantly talking about, we're set back 22 years in terms of pay equity, and we're set back 32. There's so many metrics for women that have really suffered in the past year. And I think it's because women in particular have the heavy load at home and they have the heavy load at work. And now you've got your kids working from home. I know for my family, I have a 1-year-old. He was only 4 months old when COVID hit last year. My husband and I are both working from home full time with very busy schedules. We don't have a nanny. We don't have anyone here. Thanks to COVID, we had someone come for one day. The day that COVID shut the whole world down was our first day with a nanny. And so it's crazy. And so I think there's a lot of expectations on women to just kind of suck it up and make it all happen. And the events industry, I think, is clearly has a large percentage of women in the events industry. And I think that that's really impacted. I talk to a lot of people in the events industry, fellow women who are exhausted. I mean, think about just what it has done personally, COVID, and what it's done to our industry. I mean, like how are people surviving? I'm not really sure. I'm trying to figure that out myself. But of course, like everything, I think anytime there's, you know, challenges like this, there are opportunities. But I think this last year in particular has been really, really hard on women in particular.
Yeah, so I have a really unique perspective on this because I worked at a remote first company that didn't have a headquarters before the world went remote. So front row seat about what this was going to look like for me. And what it looked like was work-life integration. Now, how you navigate that was really, really tough. And I can't agree with Liz more, what I have seen from first timers trying to sort this out. But on the other hand, too, there's so much of it with folks going remote. We are remote workers, right? Like so many of us were road warriors. It just had to look a little different once we were in the house and not on the road. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely just doubling down on what Liz said there. Women did take the brunt of it. I feel lucky that I had a dress rehearsal though.
Yeah, I've heard arguments that it, in some sense, leveled the playing field because it made us all remote and it empowered women that were working from home. But that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation today, because you guys can lend a different perspective than I can understand and that some of our audience can understand. So you mentioned that so much of the event industry is female. What would you recommend? What's some words of wisdom you can share with a younger audience, male or female, that are watching, that are thinking about getting into the event space, and now in this new world where we do have a little bit more of a digital first perspective? What would you guys that have been leading the charge in the industry, what would you recommend?
I would say progress over perfection. Don't be afraid to go out with your 70% to get that buy-in, to test out ideas. Don't wait to think you have it all tied up in a pretty little bow and then share it with your clients or up the ladder with management, because chances are, with how quickly things are evolving, you don't have all the information yet. So don't be afraid to not have all the answers, and definitely ask a lot of questions. I think that's what leads to better results instead of making assumptions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the act of doing is really important. There's education, and that's very important as well. But there is just nothing like getting out and falling on your face and learning the hard way. And that's really important. And the thing I would add is collaboration. As Dana mentioned, our industry is more collaborative now than it ever has been, perhaps just because we have to. But especially if you look at women's issues, if you just look at like the past year, one of the things I think has been so hard for women is that they've basically lost their support system. Women rely on each other. We are always calling. I know for me, I'm always calling my sister, my mother. We're passing each other's kids back and forth. You know, there's a network. My neighbors, all of us rely so much on each other, and the industry has very much become like that as well. And that's very critical. That needs to continue now and far into the future. And when I was young in my career, I had an amazing mentor. I would not have even started a business if it wasn't for her, let alone be able to keep growing it and figure out what I'm doing along the way. I think that mentorship and collaboration is so important. I'm working with several other independent event planners right now on their projects and my projects. And it's just easier to bring in people who are better at something than you are, and to have people who are there for you if something comes up in your life. I think this year has really taught us, especially, this importance of the support system that sometimes maybe we took for granted. Now we know that we can't just do this on our own. We can't just learn everything virtual. I mean, everyone's trying to like digest so much information and become virtual event experts. If I see that on another LinkedIn, I don't know what to say. But really, that's not the point. The point is you're really good at what you do, and you need to be collaborating and learning from other people in the industry. And if we can do that, we're all going to be so much better. Not to sound, too fluffy, but that is the truth. We really have to work together.
I couldn't agree more, Liz. And I think one more thing I would add there, and I'm going to steal it from Brene Brown, who is like my go-to preacher. But if you haven't read Daring to Lead, pick that up. And she just talks about that if you are taking risk and you're innovating and you're creating, you are going to get your ass kicked eventually, and probably more than once. And to learn to drown out those people in the stands who aren't in the arena with you, trying, taking risk, innovating, and instead, what Liz is saying, lean into the support system that is in the arena with you, because it is way easier to critique than it is to create. And remember that when you're trying new things.
Yeah, I appreciate what you guys are saying, and we really share that same philosophy. I mean, it's why we started the Institute, was to share education and help drive the industry forward, because we feel, Liz, to your point, that there's so much to learn right now. And it is funny. I mean, not everybody can be an expert on every piece of the ecosystem. So that said, I am curious, what have you guys seen that's evolved over the last year in the event ecosystem that's been good or bad, or what would you like to see continue improving? Because, and Liz, I'm really interested in your perspective, obviously, just given how close you are to the technology side of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I think, if we're talking about like planner perspectives that have changed, then I would say really around this concept of hybrid. I think everyone was like panicking, but I'm rapidly seeing in a good way that planners are really figuring out that hybrid does not have to mean two fully fleshed out events that run completely in tandem. That's a great option. There's so many other options. So from a planner perspective, I like to just see the creativity that's happening around rethinking what this looks like, even the hybrid format. We're very excited to start seeing some in-person coming back. We see that light at the end of the tunnel. But really thinking about how do we continue to engage our virtual audience? And it's more about that overall strategy where some things are virtual, some things are in person, some things are hybrid, but really not letting that stress you out. On the technology side, some of the things I'm very excited to see are some better engagement tools. I think chat and polling is not engaging. So I'm starting to see a lot more of kind of that Clubhouse model where, it's attendee first. People are not necessarily signing up for a particular session, but they're really creating that content. Adrian Seeger has been talking about this for a really long time with the Unconference. And I think letting your attendees drive the content is important. Letting them be the experts is super important instead of hiring the fanciest speakers. Another trend that I'm really liking, and I keep mentioning Clubhouse, I know for myself, I am videoed out. It's not just that I'm zoomed out. I don't want to be on video anymore. So I like this idea of allowing people to choose their level of engagement. And so we're seeing different platforms coming out with audio only. I like this idea of being able to choose if you want to be on stage or you want to be on video and part of the discussion, or maybe you want to be a note taker and be listening and be more passive in the engage. And that doesn't mean that you're not engaged. It doesn't mean that you're not a great attendee. It just means that's how you're choosing in that moment to participate in that particular piece of content. And so that accessibility has been something that's really evolving over the past year. We're seeing things like live translations and live captioning, but also this accessibility of letting your attendees choose their own experience to some extent, where they might want to be audio, or they might want to be video, they might want to be really active, or they might want to be more passive. And understanding that engagement doesn't mean that 95% of your audience is in the chat. Engagement is really about providing this content and this experience and this community to them in a way that serves them. And that's really more important. And so we're starting to see the technology, it's just come leaps and bounds in the last year, from streaming to engagement and really what that looks like and serving the audience. So all of those, accessibility for people with different disabilities or who speaks different languages, who joining from around the world with different scenarios and situations. Maybe you have someone joining from a really rural part of another country and they cannot be on video for hours and hours. What does our event strategy look like in that situation? And that kind of thinking is really exciting to me. I'm really happy to see that we're going in that direction. It's really exciting to see what we can offer our clients.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would add, though, it's not just about the new engagement tools, and that I do think chat and polls have its place still. But I think that onus is on the planner to design with intention. How are you going to use that? Are you staffing that with a subject matter expert who knows how to greet the chat when they get there? Again, I'll go look at how Twitch is using it and how they bring their chat into the conversation, whether you are audio or video. It goes back to the whole experience design, that each moment it matters, and what are you doing within that moment? So yes, technology has an important place in that, but it serves as a vessel for delivering that, delivering the experience. Liz, you might know who said this quote. It has really stuck with me. I think she was from SAP, Colleen, I can't think of her last name, it's escaping me, but she talks about how you are not designing, let's say you're IBM and you have 20,000 people, or like with virtual events, right? The reach, that's been the upside. The reach is explosive, but you're not really designing an experience for 20,000 people. You have to think about you're designing 20,000 moments for each of these individuals. So what does that look like? And I'm really passionate about that, because I see clients who contract and partner with certain technology solutions and providers, and then feel pretty bummed out at the end of the day that they didn't get the engagement they wanted, but they didn't go in with a plan. They didn't go in with a design of how are you going to use those features. And the more tools we throw at them, the more opportunity to have all these bells and whistles. But if you don't know what you're doing with it, and you don't have a roadmap, and like, people love to be told what to do. They need structure. So really be mindful about, if you're going to introduce XYZ tool, how are you going to meaningfully integrate that into your program?
So I've heard you guys talk about the abundance of content that came out this past year. I've heard you talk about the idea of the ongoing community, which I love that concept. We've talked about the multiple modalities. Liz talking about Clubhouse bringing in audio only experiences, the idea then of others being video first. And then you've also mentioned the idea of user created content. And so I'm curious, when you take all of those together, what does the future of what we consider traditional events look like? Because is it, you also mentioned earlier that we all kind of want to get together and share a drink or two and share stories and catch up. So I'm curious, is the purpose of future events going to be different? Might we find that instead of going and sitting in and hearing a roundtable conversation or a fireside chat, might those things be in the digital first world, but the in-person might be different kinds of experiences? Or what's your guys' take on how all that kind of comes together?
My perspective on it, sure, it'll change a little bit, but I've got lots of strong opinions about content and events. And events are definitely a content channel. And Liz might have heard me talk about this before, but the content serves a really important role. And that is to serve as context for conversation. And I love that Liz talked about this too, that the events are about the people. I don't care if you're virtual or you're in real life. It is about the people that are there. I often feel like this is about group therapy, because you're amongst people who see, hear, and understand you. So when the content can spark a conversation, I am now creating a connection with somebody at the event that then turns into community. As Liz said, that's like the land of milk and honey of what we're doing. So in IRL, I think there'll be more purposeful space, like create space. What was happening before was jamming one after another, a session, without, when you really think about when you went to an event, the most magical times, the most meaningful times, where if Liz and I walked out of a session and I'm walking to the next one with her, is getting her reaction to what we just heard. So I hope to see more space for conversation to happen.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think that is true. The content, of course, plays an important role. But I've also heard people saying that in-person will be the new luxury product and virtual will be kind of to the masses. And I think what makes that the case, if that is going to be the case, what makes it is that's where you're making the deeper relationships, those serendipitous connections. We're all having trouble replicating that online, and it can be done. But I think we're going to see, just like Dana said, a lot more space for the conversations to be happening, for that community piece. And at the same time, I think we will see the content being accessible digitally. So even if you are in person, you may not, I don't know if everyone, I'm sure everyone is not like me, but I'm one of those people. I go to a conference and I might not sit through a single session. I'm in the lobby. I'm trying to learn from other people. I have a billion meetings that I've set up. And if I can make it to a session, I'll catch it. And even more so, if all of that content is recorded and I can get it online, I absolutely think it is going to be about that space. I completely agree with Dana for the conversations. Content still, I don't think we're going to turn every in-person event into a networking event. That's not the point. But what I think we'll see is that, especially as this return to in-person is fairly new, I think the people who are going to put their money down and say, I'm going to fly across the country and go to X conference, it's because of those relationships. They want the people. And so the content is not, I think we're going to get away a little bit from the really huge events and really making them a little more niche, maybe getting away from the huge splashy speakers that you think are going to draw everyone to the event. I think we're going to see a lot more of the marketing around the relationship piece. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what gets people to put the money down as compared to, you know, President XYZ speaking.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. And that's where I think that field really is going to play a part here, because this is what they've been doing for a very, very long time. The other thing I've been trying to encourage clients to think about, it's a riskier move. And I'll tell you, a lot of clients say they want to be disruptive and they want to try something different, but it's so uncomfortable because it's different. But one thing I've been encouraging people to think about is the flipped education model. So basically, in a classroom, instead of new ideas being presented to you, this would be given as a recorded piece of content. So imagine, instead of getting that content all post-event, you get it pre-event, consume it asynchronously, and then, to Liz's point, then the reason to come is, who am I going to get access to? And now I want to roll up my sleeves and problem solve around these concepts I just learned from the video on demand library you released pre-event, not post-event.
Interesting. So kind of flip it on its head, get the content out there first and spur the conversations. If you think back on the last year, and Liz, I mean, you've been doing virtual and hybrid for a long time, but I'm curious, over the past year, what is a success story, or even if it was a failure, that we can use as a teachable moment that you guys have experienced? Because I think we can learn so much from each other as to what we've done that's worked, or what hasn't worked, to save some of our viewers that might be making that pivot from either maybe they sat out last year, or maybe they are going to up their game in terms of virtual, or maybe they're moving into hybrid. I think we can learn so much. So if you guys have something that comes to mind, would love to hear what you might share with us.
Jason, I think it's a whole show. Right? I don't know. I don't know about, how do I pick just one?
I know.
Some low-hanging fruit ones, though, I think a lot of people experience this, but I still think they're doing it right now, is what I call panicking to the platform. So looking for the technology solution first, kind of harkening back to what I said just a little bit ago, picking the solution because their competitor used it, or a company they admire used it, without asking. My favorite question is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then? And also to think about, they're not solving the same problems you are. They don't have the same community and audience that you do, that are looking to come here to solve different problems. And so first and foremost, design what your minimum viable experience is before you go shopping for your technology. Another real vulnerable story I'll share with you. I got a call to produce the DNC daytime programming, not the amazing evening programming, but to produce the caucuses. And the role was a producer. And I said, yeah, sure, sign me up, of course. 11 days to do this. I get in touch with the overall executive producer. We're going through my set of 6 caucuses. And I'm like, okay, so who's calling the show? And he said, oh, you are. I'm like, oh, I'm not a show caller. I've heard show callers. And so my lesson there is, I didn't slow down enough. We're not all necessarily speaking the same language still. I at least was resourceful and leaned into my relationships, much like Liz was talking about earlier again. I went to show calling boot camp. I was able to contract an engineer I had a relationship with, and cut my teeth with Madeleine Albright and Nancy Pelosi. Don't recommend that. Stress turned out great because I had a supportive team behind me who gave me the confidence that I could do it. So lean into your teams.
That's awesome.
And, you know, you talked, Dana, about the importance of knowing your goals, of course, before you choose technology. We've been saying that for a long time, but also I think one thing I've really learned over the past year, working with a variety of clients and with so many different kinds of attendees, is about the simplicity of it. Sometimes not even using technology, like just keep it very simple. And by that, I mean, don't necessarily use the fanciest platform because it's available. We've seen a lot of cases where people have chosen a great virtual platform. If I was the one evaluating it, I would say, check, check, check. It's got all the things you're looking for. But the attendees couldn't get into the platform. The time it took for them to figure out where they're supposed to go and where they're supposed to log in, it wasn't worth it. We ended up just scrapping the whole thing and sending them to YouTube or something. And I think that's obviously not the best case for every event. But what I'm really learning is just some of these platforms have 50 things that your attendees don't really care about at all. And you're spending all your time making a business case for why it'd be so great to have one-on-one meetings between sponsors and our attendees. And they don't care about it at all. And so what you're doing is leaving your attendees in the dust. And so I think really just thinking about what are the actual needs? How are we moving attendees? Attendees are getting access to so much virtual content. And do you think they want to figure out that today it's on this platform and tomorrow that's events on this platform and the next one? Keep it simple. Maybe it's a stream into a public site that everyone just knows how to access. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, sure, use the great tools. And there are obviously cases for that. But sometimes I think we're just overthinking, like over designing for an attendee who wants to, the program starts at 10. They want to show up at 10, look at their calendar and be in and watching a content. And we have to make that experience really easy for them.
Snap, 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 Liz. Yes. I've had clients who've done it really simply, budget constraints, but also just because they didn't want all the friction. And they have a really highly technical audience too. And they wrapped it in a beautiful landing page and they use Slack as their engagement tool. And it was wonderful. It was highly successful. In fact, in that conference, the attendees who had been meeting in real life for 10 years, now granted they had a strong community already, but they're like, this was better than any of the other events we've ever gone to. Because every moment was designed with such intention. And to Liz's point, there was sophistication in the simplicity.
It's interesting. I mean, as a production guy, that's been in my blood for years. Keep it simple, stupid. And it really applies here as well. And yet I feel like, do you guys agree? I mean, the technology now is primary going forward for events. And this is a very disruptive time because it was really secondary and additive. So how do you manage that going forward and looking at the different tools that exist now? How do you kind of keep it simple, but make sure that you are doing things that are relevant for each particular event that you're working on?
My approach is to first start with the goal of the event. What's the currency? What are you trying to achieve? And if a client tells me that we've got a new product launch, this is a big brand moment, I care less about networking and connection, then I'm going to go all in on broadcast, right? I'm going to really up-level that production. If a client tells me this is a real intimate event, it's not about pushing content out more as it is creating a space and environment for my community to connect and have conversation, I'm going to lean into a platform that's going to make those transitions easy and have more of those one-on-one networking features than I would for that client who said, I just want my Apple event. And, Jason, you and I laughed about this, their Apple event without the Apple budget. So
right.
I think it goes back to what's the currency of the event and knowing that, and then having your buckets of the different tools that will help realize those particular goals.
Yeah, the Apple event, the simplicity, the beauty of it, but yet it takes a lot of effort to get there. So Liz, what's your perspective on integrating technology going forward and kind of navigating that space? When you've been viewing technologies for so long, you must have a very unique perspective.
I mean, I don't have much to add to what Dana said. I think absolutely it's about knowing what you're trying to achieve and then honing in on that. But I have this thing that I've been talking about and seeing in event professionals, which is I think, event professionals, many of us are very type A, like we'd like to be in control. I don't know what I would do if I was out of control of something in my life. That's just not who I am. And this has been a time where a lot of event professionals feel completely out of control because they don't know the virtual space and they're really, really nervous and scared. And I think what they cling on to are like this knowledge. I've seen a mad rush towards these programs, which is all good, tons of education. And so what I hear a lot is like, people want to know the names of fancy mics and they want to know like lighting systems and they're learning all this stuff, but they really don't know what they're going to be doing with it. And this gets back to the point of just doing it, because until you do it and you realize nobody cared about all that stuff, and granted, not all of that stuff, but a lot of what people are thinking about, then you realize it's not that important. I just did a speaking session yesterday and they were asking me, tell about my setup. What do I have here in my studio? It's not a lot of stuff, and it's nothing that's really fancy. It's nothing that's really expensive, but it achieves the point, which is you can see my face, you can hear me, there's decent lighting, and you're not distracted by a lot of stuff around me, and my Wi-Fi is not giving out on you. That's what really matters. But I think it's really this thirst for like control, which equals knowledge. It's like the more I know, the more in control I feel. And we're in this like rat race a little bit to know everything. And that's where I think people are getting tripped up with things that sound really fancy, but don't necessarily achieve the goals. So, I think that's just it. Just kind of take a deep breath, do your own virtual event. If you have to do your own for your own birthday party or something, just get out there and start doing this. And you'll start to see which things really matter. It filters to the top really fast.
And yes, Liz, but and also accept you're going to skin your knees, but you're going to learn from it. And that's where growth is happening. So just embrace that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Get out there and try, right? And see what works. And that's one of my favorite things. And I say it all the time on this show is that there is no white paper you can go out and download that tells you how to do a virtual event. We all get to experience different things. Try what works, and what works is going to differ for every organization. It's such a once in a career time to try and experiment and be creative. So I completely agree with you guys. As an eye on the clock, as we look to wrap up, looking ahead the next 12, 18, 24 months, where do you guys see things going moving forward for event professionals and the industry at large?
I mentioned this earlier. I think that field is really going to become more center stage, at least in the B2B space. And I think events is getting a lot more credibility. Once you lost it, you understood the important strategic play it had. I think prior to now, our space got a really bad reputation around being super tactical, tables and chairs, but we're a real important part of the integrated marketing campaigns and flows. And then I also think you're going to see events folks become better storytellers. And we're not just looking at just this one moment in time, but how does it play into the bigger story for the year that helps push the company objectives forward, but also help solve real problems for your community and your attendees.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the bar has gotten really high for the events industry in a good way. And so, once those budgets disappeared, and as they are going to be a little tight for the next several years, it pushes you to, answer for the ROI and be very strategic. And the money's not gone, that's for sure. But really, it's about understanding what we are trying to do for our audience and being able to deliver on that. And so this year has been an amazing time. I mean, like I said, people are rushing to these programs. They are learning, and now they want to take it and put it into action. So I think the next year is going to be, I wouldn't say all roses. It's going to be hard. There are a lot of people who've made their living doing something that's not so attractive to people anymore, and they have to learn a new way to sell it and a new way to market it. And that means new event design. And that's really important. And like I said, I think a lot of that has had to happen for a long time. But it's also a very exciting time where we can try new things and think outside the box. Like, again, I said about hybrid really early that everyone thinks it has to be this super complex, you need to triple your budget and triple your team. And if you want to do that particular type of hybrid, you do. But I think already we're seeing this creativity. The events industry is very good at being creative. And so we're starting to think, wait, we could just make this one piece hybrid, and we could do this and we could do that, and we could integrate people all year round. And I think all of that is good for us. So we're going to see a lot of that innovation over the course of the next year. And that's going to push the technology to be better and better. These companies are working around the clock trying to make better solutions and trying to keep up with us who are innovating and creating new things every day that we want on our list of, demands. So I think we're going to see a ton of innovation over the next year, which will, I completely agree, set us up to be just really much more respected and rightly so, not just because people know what we do, but because we truly are delivering results for our clients.
Liz, real quick for you on that note, as like more technology solutions and innovation is going to come out, do you also see some needed consolidation in the space in the next couple of years? Because it's noisy out there right now.
This reminds me so much of the mobile app boom of 2009, 2010. It's like every time you look, there's another company. There's so much money in this virtual space. And these investors are coming in and you see who's getting the money. And some of it's very interesting to me. Some of it's like, why are they getting so much money?
Yes, it's so true.
But I think we're going to definitely see all of that start to come down. And I am keeping my eye on it because sometimes that consolidation, I won't name any names, is not really good. It leads to stagnation. It's like, we're just going to buy out the competition so we can say that we're the biggest. Those are typically not the companies I ever want to work with. So really looking for those innovative companies who are getting just enough funding to do what they need to do and to build for their customers, but aren't out there to like monopolize the market. To me, those are the ones to keep your eye on. But yeah, absolutely. We're going to see a ton of consolidation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Liz, too, because I think there's danger in trying to be all things to all people. And I hear some platforms looking at really building a robust registration platform in addition to that, which we all know registration is hard as it is. So why don't you go deep on what it is your solution is instead of trying to be all things to all people?
It's the age-old event tech question. Is it better to niche in, but then you have to integrate with 5 other platforms, or to build something more robust, but then you're delivering a half service to everybody? And so, I don't know what the answer is, honestly, but I've seen it done both ways and it doesn't usually work very well. But if I had to choose, I would say, go deep, do something really well, and let your customers figure out the integrations that they need, and then collaborate, that magic word.
There you have it. Yes.
Liz, Dana, what an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join today. I love the perspectives that you both share on the industry, and I think it's been a wealth of information for our viewers. If people want to follow you guys, learn from you further, Liz, I know you're on Clubhouse, but can you guys share how folks can follow you guys online?
I am at Liz King Events on pretty much every social network. But most importantly, we have if you go to Facebook and look up the Techsy Talk community, it's just a free Facebook group filled with event professionals. We're doing programming in there all the time and just really high quality members, that community piece that's so important. So that's where you're going to get a lot more knowledge than just whatever I can share with you. There's a lot of really amazing people in that group.
I can attest to that. You've built a wonderful community and just really valuable resources. Thank you, Liz. You can find me just on the LinkedIn's at Dana Pake, or on Twitter at Data Pake, D-A-T-A. I grew up through Tableau, so really passionate about data. That's where else you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for joining today. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you and such a fruitful conversation. I look forward to following you guys online and continuing to learn from you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Institute of Virtual Lunch and Learn series. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great day.